years. 4.5 years, the Department of Justice has been investigating Mr. Biden, an investigation run by David Weiss, an investigation that limited the number of witnesses agents could interview, an investigation that prohibited agents from referring to the president as the, quote, big guy in any of the interviews they did get to do, an investigation that curtailed attempts to interview Mr. Biden by giving the transit team secret a heads up, an investigation that notified Mr. Biden's defense counsel about a pending search warrant, an investigation run by Mr. Weiss, where they told the Congress 3 different stories in 33 days. They told this committee on June 7th, David Weiss said, I have ultimate authority to determine when, where, and whether to bring charges. 23 days later, June 30th, he told this committee, actually, I can only bring charges in my U.S. Attorney's District, the District of Delaware. And then to further confuse matters, on July 10th, he told Senator Graham, I have not sought special counsel status. Rather, I've had discussions with the Department of Justice. An investigation run by Mr. Weiss that negotiated a plea deal that the federal district court declined to accept. A plea deal so ridiculous, the judge asked this question, quote, is there any precedence for agreeing not to prosecute crimes that have nothing to do with the charges being diverted? The response from the DOJ lawyer, I'm not aware of any, Your Honor. A plea deal so ridiculous that the judge also asked, have you ever seen a diversion agreement where the agreement not to prosecute was so broad that it encompasses crimes in a different case? The response from the DOJ lawyer, no, Your Honor, we haven't. An investigation run by Mr. Weiss that not only had a sweetheart deal rejected, but according to the New York Times, there was an even sweeter deal, an earlier deal, a deal in which Mr. Biden would not have to plead guilty to anything. 4.5 years and all that, and now we get a special counsel. Now we get a special counsel, and who does the Attorney General pick? David Weiss, the guy who let all that happen. He could have selected anyone. He could have picked anyone inside government, outside government. He could have picked former attorney generals, former special counsels, but he picks the one guy he knows will protect Joe Biden. He picks David Weiss. And here's what the AG said in his August 11th announcement of David Weiss as a special counsel. Quote, I am confident that Mr. Weiss will carry out his responsibility in an even-handed and urgent manner. Urgent manner, every witness we've talked to, the 2 FBI whistleblowers that came forward, Mr. Shapley, Mr. Ziegler, the 2 FBI agents on the case, Mr. Sobocinski, Ms. Hawley, they've all said this thing was anything but urgent. The FBI said they were frustrated at the pace. Ms. Hawley said she was frustrated at the pace. And of course, the IRS agents, they said the investigation was slow-walked. And even-handed, they limited the number of witnesses that could be interviewed. They tipped off the defense counsel about a subpoena. The judge says the plea deal was a joke. And all that's just half the story. There's one investigation protecting President Biden. There's another one attacking President Trump. Justice Department's got both sides of the equation covered. Look at the classified documents case. Spring and early summer of last year, the Department of Justice asked President Trump to turn over boxes of documents. He does just that. In the process, President Trump finds 38 additional documents. He tells the Department of Justice, the very next day the FBI comes to his home and he turns them over. Then the Department of Justice asked the president to put any boxes he brought from the White House to his home in his storage room and secure it by locking it. He does that as well. Everything they asked him to do, he did. And then what's the Justice Department do? August 8th, last year, they raid President Trump's home. And according to the FBI agent, Stephen D'Antuono, the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office, the search was a complete departure from standard protocol. When we interviewed Mr. D'Antuono, he said, first, the Miami field office didn't do the search. Instead, they sent folks from D.C. He said there was no U.S. attorney assigned to the case. Instead, it was run by D.C., in particular Jay Bratt, who's now on the special counsel team. He said the FBI didn't get President Trump's counsel's approval before they did the search. And then Mr. D'Antuono told us he had recommended that when the FBI got to Mr. Trump's home, President Trump's home, They contact his counsel, wait for him to get there and do the search together. Of course, the DOJ said no. And then who does the Attorney General name as special counsel in that case? Jack Smith, the guy who a few years ago was looking for ways to prosecute Americans, targeted by Lois Lerner and the IRS, looking to prosecute the very victims of the weaponized government, the weaponized IRS. Jack Smith, the guy who prosecuted Governor McDonald, only to have the Supreme Court overturn that prosecution in a unanimous decision. That's the guy that the Attorney General of the United States selects as special counsel. And you wonder why 4 out of 5 Americans believe there are now 2 standards of justice in our great country. Mr. Garland, I anticipate a number of questions on these 2 investigations. Later in the hearing, I expect from Republicans you will also get questions about the many other concerns the American people have with the department. The school board's memorandum, treating Catholics, the memo that said pro-life Catholics are extremists, the Fifth Circuit decision, great decision, on the Department of Justice and other agencies censoring American speech, and of course the FISA law that's up for reauthorization this year, and how that process has been abused and infringed on the rights, the privacy rights of the American people. Americans believe that today in our country there is unequal application of the law. They believe that because there is. Republicans are committed to making that change. With that, I would yield to the gentleman from New York, the ranking member, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, at the outset, let me make 2 comments. One, just about every assertion you made in your opening statement has been completely refuted by witnesses who have testified before this committee. 2, far from being favored, many commentators have noted that people accused of simple gun possession while under the influence of a drug, when that gun was not used in the commission of a crime, are rarely, if ever, prosecuted the way Hunter Biden is being prosecuted. Mr. Chairman, one of this committee's most important duties is conducting oversight of the Department of Justice. We are called upon to ensure that the DOJ uses the enormous amount of power it is granted in a fair, just manner that respects the civil and human rights of all Americans. The Attorney General of the United States oversees issues that affect the lives of each and every American. Violent crime, drug trafficking, attacks on our civil rights, threats to our national security, and environmental crimes all fall under his purview. That is why we regularly request that he or she appear before this committee to speak about the work the department is doing for the welfare of the country. This is how we ensure that the department stays accountable to the American people. But if it were up to the Republicans, Americans would hear nothing about any of these substantive issues today. They would hear nothing about the rise in domestic terrorism and what the Justice Department is doing about it. They would hear nothing about what the department is doing to stop hate crimes and prevent gun violence. They would hear nothing about how the department is disrupting efforts by Russia, China, and others to interfere in our elections. Extreme MAGA Republicans have poisoned our vital oversight work. They've ignored our legitimate oversight responsibilities and used their power to stage one political stunt after another. They have wasted countless taxpayer dollars on baseless investigations into President Biden and his family, desperate to find evidence for an absurd impeachment and desperate to distract from the mounting legal peril facing Donald Trump. They have fought tirelessly to stop efforts to fight malign foreign actors trying to influence and manipulate Americans through social media. They have unconstitutionally interfered in criminal litigation and attempted to bully state and local law enforcement officers. They have publicized the names of witnesses who did not further their political goals, leading to threats of death and physical violence against those witnesses and their families. They have cost any number of private institutions and companies millions of dollars in legal fees as they struggle to respond to ridiculous and overbroad requests for information and transcribed interviews. They have issued subpoenas for show without making meaningful attempts to get the information they seek by consent. They have levied low, baseless personal attacks on any prosecutor to bring charges against Donald Trump or January 6th rioters. They have attempted to discredit investigators who are not hard enough on Donald Trump's political opponents. They have supported those involved in the deadly attack on our Capitol on January 6th in an attempt to overthrow a lawful election. They have justified conduct that we all know to be wildly illegal, like the theft of classified materials and incitement to violence. And through it all, rather than try to unite the country or solve the problems that affect us all, they have sought to exploit our divisions for cynical, personal, political gain. That is their goal, division. They want to divide this country and make our government appear like it's broken, because that is when their broken political party thrives. So today, I implore the public to see through the sham. I have no doubt that you will hear a deluge of conspiracy theories and baseless accusations. They will quote freely from so-called whistleblowers who have been broadly discredited or contradicted. They will viciously attack federal law enforcement. They will tell you that all 91 criminal charges against Donald Trump are part of a conspiracy, despite overwhelming evidence of each of Donald Trump's crimes. And they will attack Special Counsel Weiss, who was appointed, let us not forget, by Donald Trump, for not being hard enough on Hunter Biden. Republicans will continue doing what they've done for years, discrediting anyone who does not serve their political goals at any cost. And the shame of it is that in this hearing room, like on the House floor, where we are barreling towards a government shutdown while my Republican colleagues call each other names, we could be working together to put people over politics and to solve any number of problems affecting the American people. More than 30,000 Americans have died from gun violence so far this year alone. Guns have become the leading cause of death for children aged 1 to 17, surpassing car accidents. Domestic violent extremism and white nationalism are on the rise. We are seeing active clubs and other white supremacist groups pop up around the country. Anti-Semitism is at an all-time high. Malign foreign actors like Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are attempting to influence our elections. Political rhetoric is causing threats against law enforcement officials to skyrocket. Our immigration court system is in desperate need of reform. Our election workers receive death threats from conspiracy theory-driven extremists. Fentanyl is filling our streets and poisoning our children at historic rates. This list goes on, and we, the people in this room, are in a position to do something about it. In fact, it is our duty to do something about it, consistent with the oath we took when we were sworn in as members of Congress. We could work with the Department of Justice and Attorney General Garland to address any number of real substantive problems facing the American people. Instead, House Republicans will use their time today to talk about long discredited conspiracy theories and Hunter Biden's laptop. They will do it because they care more about Donald Trump than they do about their own constituents. I hope my colleagues will see reason and at least attempt to work with the Attorney General in good faith. Sadly, on the other side of the aisle, reason and good faith seem to be in short supply. In any event, Mr. Attorney General, I thank you for your testimony and thank you in advance for your patience. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back without objection. All other opening statements will be included in the record. We will now introduce today's witness. The Honorable Merrick Garland is the Attorney General of the United States. He was sworn in on March 11, 2021. We welcome our witness. Thank him for appearing today. We will begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record show that the witness is answered in the affirmative. Thank you. You can be seated. Please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony. You know how this is done, Mr. Garland. You've been here before. We want to again thank you for being here. You're welcome to give your opening statement.
I'm sorry, is this working? Yeah.
You got it.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, and distinguished members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you on behalf of the more than 115,000 employees of the Department of Justice. Since the Justice Department was founded, it has been tasked with confronting some of the most challenging issues before the country. Today, we are handling matters of significant public interest that carry great consequences for our democracy. A lot has been said about the Justice Department, about who we are and what we are doing, about what our job is and what it is not, and about why we do this work. I want to provide some clarity. First, who we are. The Justice Department is made up of more than 115,000 men and women who work in every state and communities across the country and around the globe. They are FBI, DEA, ATF agents, and United States Marshals who risk their lives to serve their communities. They are prosecutors and staff who work tirelessly to enforce our laws. The overwhelming majority are career public servants, meaning that they were not appointed by the president of any party. Second, I want to provide clarity about what the job of the Justice Department is and about what it is not. Our job is to help keep our country safe. That includes working closely with local police departments and communities across the country to combat violent crime. In fact, today we are announcing the results of a recent U.S. Marshals operation conducted with state and local law enforcement. That operation targeted violent fugitives and resulted in 4,400 arrests across 20 cities in just 3 months. Our work also includes combating the drug cartels that are poisoning Americans. Last Friday, we extradited Ovidio Guzman Lopez, a leader of the Sinaloa cartel, from Mexico to the United States. He is a son of El Chapo and one of more than a dozen cartel members we have indicted and extradited to the United States. Our job includes seeking justice for the survivors of child exploitation, human smuggling, and sex trafficking. And it includes protecting democratic institutions like this one by holding accountable all those criminally responsible for the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Our job is also to protect civil rights. That includes protecting our freedoms as Americans to worship and think as we please, and to peacefully express our opinions, our beliefs, and our ideas. It includes protecting the right of every eligible citizen to vote and to have that vote counted. It includes combating discrimination, defending reproductive rights under law, and deterring and prosecuting attacks such as hate crimes. And our job is to uphold the rule of law. That means we apply the same laws to everyone. There is not one set of laws for the powerful and another for the powerless, one for the rich and another for the poor, one for Democrats and another for Republicans, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity or religion. Our job is to pursue justice without fear or favor. Our job is not to do what is politically convenient. Our job is not to take orders from the president, from Congress, or from anyone else about who or what to criminally investigate. As the president himself has said, and I reaffirm today, I am not the president's lawyer. I will add, I am not Congress's prosecutor. The Justice Department works for the American people. Our job is to follow the facts and the law, and that is what we do. All of us recognize that with this work comes public scrutiny, criticism, and legitimate oversight. These are appropriate and important given the matters and the gravity of the matters that are before the department. But singling out individual career public servants who are just doing their jobs is dangerous, particularly at a time of increased threats to the safety of public servants and their families. We will not be intimidated. We will do our jobs free from outside influence, and we will not back down from defending our democracy. Third, I want to explain why we approach our job in this way. The Justice Department was founded in the wake of the Civil War and in the midst of Reconstruction with the first principal task of bringing to justice white supremacists and others who terrorize Black Americans to prevent them from exercising their civil rights. The Justice Department's job then and now is to fulfill the promise that it is at the foundation of our democracy, that the law will treat each of us alike. That promise is also why I am here. My family fled religious persecution in Eastern Europe at the start of the 20th century. My grandmother, who was one of 5 children, born in what is now Belarus, made it to the United States, as did 2 of her siblings. The other 2 did not. Those 2 were killed in the Holocaust. And there is little doubt that but for America, the same thing would have happened to my grandmother. But this country took her in, and under the protection of our laws, she was able to live without fear of persecution. That protection is what distinguishes this country from so many others. The protection of law, the rule of law, is the foundation of our system of government. Repaying this country for the debt my family owes, for our very lives, has been the focus of my entire professional career. That is why I served in the Justice Department under 5 different attorneys general under both Democratic and Republican administrations. That is why I spent more than 25 years ensuring the rule of law as a judge, and that is why I left a lifetime appointment as a judge and came back to the Justice Department 2.5 years ago. And that is why I'm here today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. And you were right. America is the greatest country ever, and we on this side, I know, are very concerned about the equal application of the law that you talked about in your opening statement. With that, we will move to 5-minute questions, and we will start with the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss, the rule of law does distinguish our country, but you have not upheld that. You have allowed the rule of law to erode, and that's why 65% of the people in this country have no faith in the Department of Justice under your leadership. They don't trust it. They don't trust you. The reason is because they're witnessing every day a politicized Justice Department in a 2-tiered system of justice. For example, they see the DOJ, of course, aggressively prosecuting President Biden's chief political rival, Mr. Trump, while at the same time, they see slow walking and special treatment given to the president's son. That's just a fact that everybody can see with their own 2 eyes. I want to focus on that investigation of the Biden family. We have many important questions for you today about that. Let me just get right to the chase. Has anyone from the White House provided direction at any time to you personally or to any senior officials at the DOJ regarding how the Hunter Biden investigation was to be carried out?
No.
Have you had personal contact with anyone at FBI headquarters about the Hunter Biden investigation?
I don't recollect the answer to that question, but the FBI works for the Justice Department. It's
I'm sorry. You don't recollect whether you've talked with anybody at FBI headquarters about an investigation into the president's son?
I don't believe that I did. I promised the Senate when I came before it for confirmation that I would leave Mr. Weiss in place and that I would not interfere with his investigation.
Okay,
I have kept that promise.
All right. Have you had personal contact with anybody at the Baltimore field office on the Hunter Biden matter?
No.
On July 10, 2023, U.S. Attorney David Weiss told Senator Lindsey Graham, quote, I had discussions with departmental officials regarding potential appointment under 28 U.S.C. Section 515, which would have allowed me to file charges in a district outside my own without the partnership of the local U.S. attorney, end quote. With whom did Mr. Weiss have those discussions?
I'm not going to get into the internal deliberations of the department.
Oh, but you must, sir. This is important for us. We have oversight responsibility over your department, and we need these answers.
As appropriate and necessary for Mr. Weiss to have conversations with the department. I made clear that if he wanted to bring a case in any jurisdiction, he would be able to do that. The way you do that is to get an order signed by the Attorney General called a 515 order. I promised he would be able to do that, and he in his letters made clear he understood he would be able to do that.
Okay. Can you tell us about any briefings or discussions that you personally have had with Mr. Weiss regarding any and all federal investigations of Hunter Biden?
I'm going to say again, I promised the Senate that I would not interfere with Mr. Weiss.
So you have not, I'm just, under oath today, your testimony is, You have not had any discussions with Mr. Weiss about this matter?
Under oath, my testimony today is that I promised the Senate I would not intrude in his investigation. I do not intend to discuss the internal Justice Department deliberations, whether or not I had them.
Oh, okay. So your testimony today is you're not going to tell us whether you've had discussions with Mr. Weiss.
My testimony today is I told the committee that I would not interfere. I made clear that Mr. Weiss would have the authority to bring cases that he thought were appropriate.
Okay.
Mr. Weiss's
All right.
letter.
Okay, let me stop you. For a second time, sir. Are you aware that FBI officials have come before this committee and they have stated that there was a cumbersome bureaucratic process that Mr. Weiss had to go through to bring charges in another judicial district? You know that?
I'm not aware, but that's not true. There's nothing cumbersome about the process.
So those
All I
whistleblowers
need
are
to-
lying to us under oath? Those whistleblowers are lying?
I
Is
didn't
your
say
testimony?
that. Their description of the process is cumbersome is an opinion. It's not a fact question. All I have to do is
Okay,
sign a
all
section.
right. Let me get to the fact. Mr. Weiss has been the lead prosecutor on the Hunter Biden case since 2018, correct?
I'm sorry?
Mr. Weiss has been the lead prosecutor on the Hunter Biden case since 2018. Now, here's the question.
He's been the lead prosecutor since he was appointed by President Trump.
Okay,
And
why,
assigned-
let me ask you, why has the Justice Department dragged this investigation out for so long? Does it really take years to determine if Hunter Biden lied on a federal form related to purchasing a firearm?
Mr. Weiss was a long-time career prosecutor. President Trump appointed him as the
You're not answering the question. Is that standard procedure? Should it take that long to make such a simple determination?
I'm answering the question. Give me an opportunity to do so.
Okay?
He was charged with that investigation under the previous administration. He's continued. He knows how to conduct investigations, and I have not intruded or attempted to evaluate that because that was the promise I made to the Senate.
The whistleblowers gave us testimony about serious misconduct at the Justice Department in regards to the preferential treatment afforded Hunter Biden. Has your office requested an investigation into that?
There are well-known processes for how whistleblowers make their claims. I am a strong proponent of whistleblowers and a strong defender. We have an Inspector General's office. We have an Office of Professional Responsibility. That is the way in which complaints from whistleblowers should be and are appropriately handled.
I'm out of time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Nadler. Okay, Dan.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney General, thank you for being here today. It's no secret that some of my colleagues across the aisle have threatened to shut down the government unless and until the FBI and the Department of Justice are defunded. One Trump-light presidential candidate has said that we should abolish the FBI altogether. Mr. Attorney General, what would be the impact on America of defunding the FBI?
Defunding the FBI would leave the United States naked to the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party, to the attacks by Iranians on American citizens and attempts to assassinate former officials, to the Russian aggression, to North Korean cyber attacks, to violent crime in the United States, which the FBI helps to fight against, to all kinds of espionage, to domestic violent extremists who have attacked our churches, our synagogues, our mosques, and who have killed individuals out of racial hatred. I cannot imagine the consequences of defunding the FBI, but they would be catastrophic.
Thank you. I want to turn to Mr. Weiss's investigation and the authority he's been granted to conduct that investigation without interference in whatever way he deems necessary. You testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee on March 1st of this year that David Weiss had, quote, full authority over any investigation concerning Hunter Biden. Was that a true statement at the time?
Yes, Mr. Weiss has full authority to conduct his investigation however he wishes, and Mr. Weiss has confirmed that in letters to this committee.
Thank you. This authority included ensuring that Weiss would be able to bring charges in jurisdiction outside of Delaware if necessary. Is that correct?
I assured Mr. Weiss publicly that he would have the authority to bring a case outside of Delaware if he thought that was appropriate.
Does that remain true today?
Yes, that is true today.
Has it ever been the case over the course of this investigation that Mr. Weiss would not have been able to bring charges outside of Delaware if warranted?
As a matter of my authority, I promised he would be able to do that. I think as is apparent in the letters exchanged with the committee and in my previous testimony, in order for a United States attorney or a special counsel or anyone else to bring a case outside of his jurisdiction, it requires me to sign a paper called Section 515. That's the statute which permits bringing cases outside of the jurisdiction. I promised that I would do whatever was required to enable Mr. Weiss to bring a case outside his jurisdiction if that's what he thought was appropriate.
And I assume it was your understanding that Mr. Weiss was fully aware that he could bring charges outside of Delaware if necessary when you testified on March 1st.
Mr. Weiss has said so in the letters he sent to this committee.
Thank you. Did he ever say or do anything that might make him unsure of where he could bring charges?
Mr. Weiss's own letters reflect that he had never asked me to be special counsel and that he understood the process for asking for a signature on a Section 515 form.
There have been accusations that the handling of the Hunter Biden matter is an example of a two-tiered system of justice. What's your response to that allegation?
The Justice Department treats everyone alike, regardless of party, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of wealth. Everyone is treated alike. I understand that people may not understand why particular investigations are conducted in particular ways until all the facts come out. That's what we have a court for, and all of the explanations will come out with respect to Mr. Weiss, for example. At the end of his period as special counsel, one of the requirements is that he file a report, which I have promised to make public to the extent that's lawful and consistent with department policy. He will explain his decisions to prosecute and not to prosecute.
Thank you. What are the impacts of members of Congress making such accusations against the DOJ? Do baseless accusations from government officials make it more difficult for investigators to do their job and effectively investigate the subject?
Members of the Justice Department are strong and tough and able to understand that their job is to do the right thing regardless of any pressures from any quarter. What is dangerous, and I'm not talking about the committee, but what is dangerous is when anyone singles out a career prosecutor or a career FBI agent, and we know as a matter of fact that that kind of singling out has led to threats. This is a concern across the board. It is not a concern about anyone in particular.
I think you would have been justified in referring to the committee. My time has expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Attorney General, you're the only person who could ensure that Mr. Weiss had all the necessary authority, aren't you?
I'm the only person who can sign an agreement with respect to special counsel. The authority to do Section 515 can be signed by other people in the department.
You're aware, ultimately, though, the authority is yours.
Yes.
You made the point that you don't take orders from the president about such things. You decide, ultimately, what the Justice Department will do.
I announced at the beginning, I promised that he would be able to bring whatever cases he wants, and I have followed through on that promise. I'm permitted to make that kind of promise, and I have made it.
Did you undertake to inform yourself, to interact with him sufficient to ensure that he knew he possessed that authority, or that you would see to it that he had all necessary
I
authority?
don't think there's any doubt that he knew. He has written 3 letters to this committee indicating that he understood he had that authority.
You're also aware, though, aren't you, sir, that a senior IRS investigator, whistleblower, came forward and has testified publicly that Mr. Weiss stated that he did not have such authority. He was not the decider. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of the testimony. I was not present at any point during that statement. And Mr. Weiss, who was present, has indicated that he had the authority and he knew that he had it.
Subsequent to those developments, though, you decided to make Mr. Weiss special counsel, which you had not done before.
Mr. Weiss made clear he did not ask me to be special counsel until last month, and last month I made him special counsel.
Did you have some lack of information that you should have had that would have caused you to act earlier to make him special counsel?
Mr. Weiss did not ask to be special counsel before.
I understand he didn't ask. You've said that, sir. Did you take the necessary steps to inform yourself what authority he understood he had or what obstacles he was encountering?
Look, Mr. Weiss had, as I said from the beginning, at the very beginning, that he had authority over all matters that pertain to Hunter Biden.
Have you learned that he was in fact deterred by decisions of the United States attorneys in the District of Columbia and the Northern District of California from proceeding as he thought best?
With respect, Congressman, Mr. Weiss has not said that he was deterred. He said that he followed the normal processes of the department and that he was never denied the ability to bring a case in another jurisdiction.
Well, what changed then, Mr. Attorney General? What made you decide that it was sufficient to leave him in the situation he was until you decided to make him special counsel?
Mr. Weiss asked for that authority given the extraordinary circumstances of this matter, and given my promise that I would give him any resources he requested, I made him special counsel.
So until that time, was it just a matter of his predilection, or did you undertake to investigate and discern what he was doing with his authority and whether he had faced any obstacles?
I did not endeavor to investigate because I had promised that I would not interfere with this investigation. The way to not interfere is to not investigate an investigation.
Once he requested to be named special counsel, having not done so over months and months of your tenure, did you ask him what had changed that made him now need to be a special counsel?
Mr. Weiss asked to be made special counsel. I had promised that I would give him all the resources he needed, and I made him special counsel.
When did the Justice Department permit statutes of limitations to expire on some of the prospective charges against Hunter Biden for tax violations?
I don't know anything about the statute of limitations here. The investigation was in the hands of Mr. Weiss to make the determinations that he thought were appropriate.
Are you unaware that statutes of limitations have in fact been allowed to expire after there having been tolling agreements in place?
I'm going to say again, the determination of where to bring cases and which kinds of cases to bring was left to Mr. Weiss.
Yes, sir. I understand that you've said that. That's part of the problem. The question is, are you aware that statutes of limitations have been allowed to expire while the matter was under investigation?
The investigators were fully familiar with all the relevant law.
I'm not asking for the excuses. I'm asking whether you're aware of that fact, sir.
I'm going to say again. I'm going to say again and again if necessary. I did not interfere with, did not investigate, did not make determinations.
Those are statements in response to other questions. Everybody in the country now knows who's paying attention to this, that the Justice Department permitted statutes of limitations to expire. Every lawyer who's ever practiced understands the implications of allowing statutes of limitations to expire. Do you not even know as you sit here whether that occurred or not?
Prosecutors make appropriate determinations on their own. In this case, I left it to Mr. Weiss whether to bring charges or not. That would include whether to let statute of limitations expire or not, whether there was sufficient evidence to bring a case that was subject to the statute of limitations or not, whether there were better cases to bring or not.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Attorney General, for being here with us this morning. You know, as much as we see dirt being thrown in the air, there's a lot of misinformation that I think is intended to confuse people. I would like to ask unanimous consent to put into the record 3 letters from Mr. Weiss that he sent to Congress on June 7th, June 30th, and July 10th.
Without objection.
He said over and over again that he has full authority over this case, including the ability to seek special counsel or special attorney status if needed. You know, trying to imply otherwise is just simply false. Mr. Weiss was appointed by then President Trump. Your decision was to leave the Trump-appointed attorney completely in charge of this, hands off from you. he makes all the calls without interference from the Attorney General. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so the idea that you would interfere is completely wrong. And I'd also like to ask, you talked about your independence from the president, but also your independence from the Congress. Have you ever come across historically an instance where the Congress of the United States tried to or successfully interfered with a prosecution initiated by the Department of Justice based on the facts and the law?
I want to be gentle about the word interfere, but it is, just as a historical example, in the case of Iran-Contra, the consequences of actions by the Congress were that the special counsel's investigation of Iran, of Mr. North, were dismissed.
Correct. Before I go into another question I have, I just would like unanimous consent to put into the record the annual statistical transparency report dated April of 2023. It indicates that the deduplicated counting method for FBI queries of U.S. persons under the Section 702 database numbered over 119,000. I would just like to note, and we will work with you, this committee on a bipartisan basis is very concerned about querying of the 702 database for U.S. persons without a warrant. We're not suggesting that the law does not permit that, but we are going to visit this issue because it is my view that querying the 702 database that has been collected without due process, because it relates to foreign individuals, is completely wrong in terms of the privacy rights of Americans. And I'm hoping that we can work successfully with you as we craft requirements for a warrant to do that querying. I'd like to ask, as we know, and has been mentioned by the ranking member, the proposal is basically to defund the police by the Republicans, to defund the FBI. I am concerned that if we defund the police, as the majority has suggested, that really doesn't have an impact on the statute of limitations. So if we were to defund the Department of Justice, defund the FBI and the police, as has been suggested, what would happen with the statute of limitations for cases that you were pursuing if you were not able to actually do that? Would they be suspended anyway, or would the criminals get off scot-free?
Well, I know in my experience as a judge, if I was asked a legal question and I don't know the answer, I would go back to the office and study it, and I'll have to do that in this case. I don't have the answer.
Well, I think I do, because there's nothing in the statute that allows for the statute of limitations to be suspended because the government has been shut down or because the police have been defunded through the budget process. And I just think we ought to take the implications of a shutdown very seriously in terms of allowing criminals to get off. And I see that my time has expired, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair does not recognize himself. Quote, Mr. Weiss has full authority to bring cases in other jurisdictions if he feels it's necessary. That was your response, Attorney General, to Senator Grassley's question on March 1st, 2023. You just referenced it when Mr. Bishop was questioning you. Only problem is he'd already been turned down by the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia, Mr. Graves. So he didn't have full authority, did he?
I had an extended conversation with Senator Grassley at the time. We briefly touched on the Section 515 question and how that process went. I've never been suggested.
My point's real simple, Mr. Garland. You said he had complete authority, but he'd already been turned down. He wanted to bring an action in the District of Columbia, and the U.S. Attorney there said, no, you can't. And then you go tell the United States Senate under oath that he has complete authority.
I'm going to say again that no one had the authority to turn him down. They could refuse to partner with him. They could not.
You can use whatever language. Refuse to partner is turning down.
Well, it's not the same under a well-known Justice Department practice.
Here's why the statute of limitations question is important, and Mr. Bishop was getting at just a few minutes ago. Here's why it's important. You let the statute of limitations lapse for 2014, 2015. Those were the years with the felony tax charges where Hunter Biden was getting income from Burisma. Here are 4 facts that I think are so important. Hunter Biden was put on the board of Burisma, made a lot of money, got paid a lot of money over those years, a couple $1 million. He wasn't qualified. Fact number 2, he wasn't qualified to be on the board of Burisma. Not my words, his words. He said he got on the board because of his last name. The brand, as Devin Archer said when he was under oath and we deposed him. Fact number 3, Burisma executives told Hunter Biden, we're under pressure, we need help. Fact number 4, Joe Biden goes to Ukraine, leverages our tax money, American people's tax money, to get the prosecutor fired who was applying the pressure. Interestingly enough, that fact is entirely consistent with what the confidential human source told the FBI, and they recorded in the 1023 form. The same form Mr. Wray didn't want to let this committee and the Congress see. That all happened. That all happened. And what I'm wondering is why you guys let the statute of limitations lapse for those tax years that dealt with Burisma income.
There's one more fact that's important, and that is that this investigation was being conducted by Mr. Weiss, an appointee of President Trump. You will, at the appropriate time, have the opportunity to ask Mr. Weiss that question, and he will no doubt address it in the public report that will be transmitted to the Congress. I don't know the answer to those questions.
Did they forget? Did the lawyers just like let it, did they just like, oh, darn, we let it, were they careless?
I expect that won't be what he says, but because I
You
promised...
know that's not the case, because as Mr. Bishop pointed out, they had a tolling agreement. They talked to Hunter Biden's defense counsel and say, let's extend the statute of limitations. And then at some point, they made an intentional decision to say, we're going to let the statute of limitations lapse. And I want to know who decided that and why they did it.
Mr. Weiss was a supervisor of the investigation at that time and at all times. He made the appropriate decisions, and you'll be able to ask him that question, and he will.
You know why they did it? Everyone knows why they did it. May not say it, but everyone knows why they did it. They didn't. Burisma, those tax years, that dealt with that involved the president. It's one thing to have a gun charge in Delaware. That doesn't involve the president of the United States. But Burisma, oh my, that goes right to the White House. We can't have that. And we can slow walk this thing along. We can even extend the statute of limitations, and then we can intentionally let it lapse. And we know this investigation was slow. Here's what everyone said. Shapley said, DOJ slow walked the investigation. Ziegler, slow walking in the approvals of everything. This happened at the Delaware's attorney's office and DOJ tax level. Mr. Sobocinski, the FBI agent, said, I would have liked to see things move faster. Ms. Hawley said the same. Every witness we've talked to said this thing was slow walked, and we know why. They slow walked it long enough to let the statute of limitations run so they wouldn't have to get into Burisma. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I'm asking Mr. Garland the
I
question.
think I've tried to make clear that I don't know the specifics of the investigation. Much of what you are describing occurred during the Trump administration, during a Justice Department appointed by President Trump.
No, it didn't. This is 4.5 years, this investigation. We're talking about the last few years. Your statement was just this year, March 1st, to Senator Grassley.
No, I'm sorry. I was trying to respond to your descriptions of what the IRS agents said about certain things.
Statute of limitations is 6 years. That lapsed here in the Biden administration.
On the statute of limitations, we'll say again that the explanation for why the statute of limitation was lapsed, if it was, has to come from Mr. Weiss.
My time is this, but let me ask one last question real quick here. Who decided that David Weiss would stay on as U.S. attorney?
Look, this had occurred before I came. Mr. Weiss had been kept on. I promised the...
No, I didn't say, you can walk all through that. I said, who decided? The White House decided.
Mr. Weiss,
right? They serve at the pleasure of the president, right?
Mr. Weiss was...
Joe Biden decided to keep David Weiss as U.S. attorney. You weren't sworn in until March. He was told he was going to stay on in February. Pretty fundamental question. Who decided David Weiss was going to stay as U.S. attorney in Delaware?
Mr. Weiss,
your time has expired.
Mr. Chairman, your time has expired.
I'm waiting for an answer, and then I'll yield.
Well, you asked the question after your time had expired already. Point of order.
Gentleman can respond, then I'll go to Ms. Jackson-Lee.
Mr. Weiss was the U.S. Attorney from the District of Delaware when I came on. He had been appointed by President Trump. I promised that he would be permitted to stay on for this investigation, and that is what happened.
Gentleman from
Mr. Chairman,
Texas,
Mr. Chairman.
gentleman from New York's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you misquoted from the transcript of the Senate hearing. I therefore ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the entire transcript of the Senate hearing.
Without objection, but I didn't
Thank you.
misquote what Mr. Garland said. Ms. Jackson-Lee from Texas, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. None of the Republicans' goals today include solving Americans' problems of which they are concerned of. There are many reasons, Mr. Attorney General, that prosecutors decline to bring charges. One of those reasons is that they don't have any evidence for a conviction. That is the justice way. That is just in America. So let me raise these questions and concerns with you today. As we all know, Republicans have repeatedly alleged that the DOJ and FBI are conspiring to shield the Biden family from public criticism and giving Hunter Biden special treatment in its investigations. They have demonized law enforcement officials working with this case at every turn, which has directly led to increased threats against FBI officials, law enforcement, of which they pretend to support. I want to place into the record 2 excerpts from recent transcribed interviews, and I would ask that copies be made available to you. The first is from a June interview with Jennifer Moore, FBI's former Executive Assistant Director for Human Resources. She told this committee that FBI had received so many threats that it had to stand up an entire 10-person unit just to deal with them. She said it is unprecedented. It's a number we have never had before. More testimony pages 202 to 203. The second excerpt is from an interview earlier this month with Thomas Sobocinski, the special agent in charge of FBI's Baltimore field office. Here's what he said. I joined the FBI 25 years ago. I joined for a reason, to protect the American people, uphold the Constitution. I've been to war. My family's been in bad places. My kids have been evacuated from war zones or quasi-war zones. I've been in some bad things. I have accepted that. I am solely focused on 2 things, and they're not mutually exclusive. The first is, like every investigation, I want to get to a resolution in a fair, apolitical way. The second thing, it's becoming more important and more relevant, is keeping my folks safe. And that part, I've never expected to have to be able to be concerned about keeping families safe. So that, for me, this is becoming more and more of a job that I have to do and take away from what I was assigned or signed up to do, which was to investigate and do these things. So when you talk about potential frustrations with communication, I am personally frustrated with anything that places my employees and their families in enhanced danger. Our children, their children, did not sign up for this. Mr. Attorney General, do you agree that politically charged rhetoric claiming that law enforcement agents, and I have many questions if you could be brief, are corrupt and contribute to this onslaught of threats against public servants?
Okay, as I said in my opening statement, we have had an astounding number of threats against public servants over the last several years. I think that when career public servants in the Justice Department and in election workers and airline crews, when they are singled out, this can lead to threats of violence and actual violence. We have the actual example of an attack on an FBI office by somebody who was incensed by political rhetoric. This does happen. We must not allow that to happen in this country.
Does the rhetoric regarding the Biden case have any basis in reality?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that first part.
Does the rhetoric regarding the Biden case have any basis in reality?
No, it does not.
How does this impact FBI and DOJ employees' ability to do their work? I think you mentioned specifically FBI and DOJ employees.
As I've already said, the agents of the FBI and the prosecutors understand that criticism comes with their job, and they will continue to do their jobs without fear or favor. But the idea of threatening their safety or that of their families is just abhorrent.
Thank you. And I assume that provisions have had to be in place to protect these agents and their families.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
I assume that provisions or protections have had to be in place to protect these agents and their families.
Yes, that's correct.
Let me move on. Thank you very much, General. Let me move on to the fentanyl crisis, and I want to introduce H.R. 4272. But let me just put on the record so that you can probably summarize, and I ask for the indulgence of my chair, but in any event, that the FBI, the DOJ are focused, needlepoint focused, if you will, on the crisis of fentanyl. I want to just raise that for you, and then I just want to follow up with one or two other questions, if you would be able to comment on these collectively. I am dealing with the crisis of human trafficking and the prioritizing of America's children. They are under siege. And the level of child sexual abuse materials generating into human trafficking, and I want to put H.R. 30 on the record, indicates from ICAC that there are 99,000 IP cases where they're enticing children, and maybe only 1% of them being investigated. I'd like your comment on that. And finally, in the approach of of Yom Kippur, to emphasize the work that is hopefully still being doing with anti-Semitism, attacks on immigrants, and African Americans and Latinos. If you would answer those questions, fentanyl, the human trafficking, and then domestic terrorism.
These are all horrendous problems propagated by people who are truly evil. We are fighting the fentanyl scourge in every possible way, starting with the precursors in China, to the labs in Mexico, to the cartels that are bringing the drugs into the United States, to their networks in the United States, to the streets of America. And we will continue to do that with every resource that Congress gives us. Human smuggling and sex trafficking are obviously abhorrent. The Justice Department has task forces on both of these subjects and have brought many, many cases on these subjects. The idea of putting sexually explicit material about children on the web is another area that we are continuing to investigate and to prosecute and to ask the social media to take down from their sites.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman floor is recognized for 5 minutes.
I guess I'm just wondering, Mr. Attorney General, has anyone at the department told President Biden to knock it off with Hunter? I mean, you guys are charging Hunter Biden on some crimes, investigating him on others. You've got the president bringing Hunter Biden around to state dinners. Has anyone told him to knock it off?
Our job in the Justice Department is to pursue our cases without reference to what's happening in the outside world.
Just yes or no. Have you done that?
That is what we do.
So it's a no?
No one that I know of has spoken to the White House about the Hunter Biden case.
I'm wondering then.
Of course not.
Okay, I got it. So Hunter Biden is selling art to pay for his $15,000 a month rent in Malibu. How can you guarantee that the people buying that art aren't doing so to gain favor with the president?
The job of the Justice Department is to investigate criminal allegations. You have information.
Are you investigating this? I mean, someone who bought Hunter Biden's art ended up with a prestigious appointment to a federal position. Doesn't it look weird that he's become this immediate success in the art world as his dad is president of the United States? Isn't that odd?
I'm not going to comment about any specific.
Not going to comment, not going to investigate. So
right.
Hunter Biden associate Devin Archer told us that Hunter sold the appearance of access to then Vice President Biden. Are you confident he has stopped doing that?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Hunter Biden associate Devin Archer told us that Hunter sold the appearance of access to then Vice President Biden. Are you confident he has stopped?
I'm going to say again that all these matters are within the purview of Mr. Weiss. I have not interfered with them, and I do
but if
not.
you were confident that he had stopped, you could.
And I do not
probably
intend
tell
to
us
interfere with
he
him.
had. So it was a lot of Chinese money that was working its way through these shell companies into the accounts of the Biden family. So the China initiative was set up during the Trump administration at the Department of Justice to go after the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party. And the Biden Justice Department dissolved the China initiative. So I guess I'm wondering, does the department have any documents that would detail the basis for why you got rid of the China initiative that President Trump had set up?
The Assistant Attorney General of the National Security Division gave a long speech which explained that. He has testified before Congress several times. We'd be happy to provide you with
What's the basis? Just tell us all now. Why was the China initiative dissolved?
What the Assistant Attorney General said was that we face attacks from 4 nation states: North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran, and that we need to focus our attention on the broad range of these attacks. Sometimes we don't know.
But wait a second. Are you saying that North Korea has the same malign influence risk to the United States as the Chinese Communist Party? Are you trying to represent there's some parity there? Because here's what it looks like. It looks like the Chinese gave all this money to the Bidens, and then you guys came in and got rid of the China initiative, and it was successful. Like, I saw one rationale that you guys got rid of the China initiative because it was racial profiling. But one of the people you convicted was a guy named Charles Lieber, who was a Harvard professor taking $50,000 a month to do China's bidding and give them whatever research was being done. Are you aware of the millions of dollars that moved through Rob Walker's shell companies from Chinese Communist Party entities into Biden family bank accounts? Are you aware of that?
There were a lot of questions that you just asked. Let me start with the first one about North Korea. North Korea is a dangerous actor, both kinetically and with respect to cyber.
But not on par with China. I'm on the Armed Services
I'm not in the
Committee, Mr.
business
Attorney
right
General.
now.
It makes you look unserious to suggest
May
that.
I answer your question or not?
Answer the question about whether or not you know about all the millions of dollars that
So
moved
you
through
don't
Rob
want me to
Walker's
answer about North Korea?
I already know the answer, and so does everyone. They're not the same risk as China. So let's get on to serious questions and serious answers. Do you know about the money that moved through Rob Walker's shell companies, yes or no?
As I have said repeatedly, I have left these matters to Mr. Weiss. I've not
Blissfully
intruded.
ignorant.
I've not interfered.
Blissfully
I've
ignorant
not
these
tried to
things.
find out what
it's
he
like
knows.
You're looking the other way on purpose because everybody knows this stuff's happening. And you know what? People don't pay bribes to not get something in return. Right? The China initiative resulted in the convictions of a Harvard professor, of someone at Monsanto. So we were working against the Chinese. They paid the Bidens, and now you're sitting here telling me that North Korea is the big threat. I got to get to this one thing on January 6th. So did the FBI lose count of the number of paid informants on January 6th?
Let me answer your question about China.
I want you to answer this question. I only get 5 minutes. You've already sort of, I think, screwed the pooch on China. So January 6th, did you lose count of the number of federal assets? Did you lose count and order an audit?
Gentleman's time has expired.
I get an answer to the question of did they lose count?
No, let him answer the question.
The time has expired. The Attorney General can respond.
China is the most aggressive, most dangerous adversary that the United States faces, and we are doing everything within our power to rebut that, to stop that, to prevent their invasions, both kinetic, and through cyberspace. And we will continue to do
If someone
that.
gave that answer in your courtroom when you were a judge, you would tell them they were being non-responsive and you would direct them to answer the question.
Point of order, Your Honor.
Time is,
Badgering the witness.
Point of
Time
order,
has
please.
expired.
I got it. I was
You like
laughing.
Your Honor? You want to stick with that?
Yeah, I was getting laughed at to call me Your Honor.
Point of order either way.
Okay, I understand that too.
All right.
But the gentleman asked his question before his time expired. The Attorney General did not respond to the gentleman's question. I was hoping he would respond to the question about the confidential human sources on January 6th. He didn't respond to that. I'm sure we're going to get an answer to that later.
Of course,
Now-
Mr. Chairman. There
now
were
recognize
8
the
questions
gentleman-
before that he was not given a chance to answer.
Understand,
So
but
the witness might have thought.
But the witness doesn't,
This was
Mr.
his
Chairman,
chance to
point of
answer
order.
the
The witness does not control the
hang
time.
on. Exactly right. Members control the time. If they want to switch their question and focus on one more question that they'd like an answer to, I want to give the witness a chance to respond to that final question that Mr. Gates asked. He didn't respond to it. Someone else is going to ask it, I'm sure. We now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. I'll just follow up a few of the questions we were asked here. Did Devin Archer not say Joe Biden did nothing wrong?
Be clear, I only know about Mr. Archer from newspaper reports. I want to be clear that I kept my promise to not involve myself in this
Okay,
investigation.
then I'll state it. He said that Joe Biden did nothing wrong. Secondly, did you say that President Trump appointed Weiss, who then you appointed?
Yes, President Trump appointed Mr. Weiss as United States Attorney.
So that should take care of that issue. And they say the department's been weaponized. Wasn't there an investigation of Mr. Gates and you didn't prosecute him?
Justice Department does not make comments about its
Well,
investigation.
it shows we're not weaponized. If we were weaponized, we'd have done it. That was a beautiful exchange there, and it shows we didn't do that. You are the nation's chief law enforcement officer, and I appreciate that. And law enforcement's one of our government's fundamental functions. crime is growing too much in this country and in my city of Memphis as well. We need law enforcement to be effective, swift, and fair. I'd like to focus my questions on what actually affects the American people. Crime. How do we get smarter law enforcement requiring smart resource allocations, not about funding or less funding, but the right funding for the right programs, and see that that happens? Memphis, as hiring has become more difficult, we've lowered our standards to get more officers. That's not the way to do it. The COPS program is helping us review the policy and procedures, and I thank you, the COPS program, for doing that. But what can Department of Justice do to help see that law enforcement is more efficient and more effective?
So the key to this is our partnership, the FBI, DEA, Marshals, ATF's partnership at every local level with local and state law enforcement, in task forces, in discussions to target the most dangerous criminals in those communities, but at the same time to engage the communities to help engender community trust in law enforcement. Everyone who's prosecuted violent crime cases, and that includes me, knows that you need the trust of the community in order to get witnesses. We in the Justice Department are helping our state and local colleagues do just that. The funding you described from the COPS office and in the Office of Justice Programs allows us to give money to state and local police organizations that are having trouble with recruitment and retention and promotion of law officers, and helps them make their departments respectful of constitutional rights, and at the same time effective in the investigation and prosecution of criminal law violations.
Thank you for those activities, those programs through COPS. You've also reinstituted patterns and practices investigations of certain police departments, and Memphis is one of them, and I thank you for doing that. Can you share with us how important those pilot programs are and how they can improve policing?
Yes, Congress has authorized the Justice Department to conduct pattern or practice investigations when they have a reasonable belief in that there has been a pattern of unconstitutional behavior in a police department. We are careful to select those cases where we think there is such a pattern. We make those investigations. We then work with the law enforcement agencies in the cities. Our hope is to come to a consent decree that will lead to a better, more efficient, and more constitutional police department. We have been successful in all of our cases to date in reaching consent agreements.
Thank you, sir. You were part of announced bringing of charges, federal charges, against the 5 officers who killed Tyree Nichols in Memphis, and I thank you for that. We need that federal charge, and we need our department looked at. If there's a shutdown of the federal government, how will that affect the Department of Justice and affect policing in local communities?
I haven't done a complete calculation on the effects of a shutdown and the difference between which employees are indispensable under the statute and which ones not. It will certainly disrupt all of our normal programs, including our grant programs to state and local law enforcement, and to our ability to conduct our normal efforts with respect to the entire scope of our activities, including helping state and locals fight violent crime.
Thank you, sir, and Happy New Year, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman, Mr. McClintock from California, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Attorney General, looking again at the appointment of Jack Smith and David Weiss, this double standard of justice couldn't be more glaring. Jack Smith was deeply involved in the IRS scandal that targeted conservative political groups to harass. His malicious prosecution of former Governor McDonnell was unanimously overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. Chief Justice Roberts rebuked Smith directly for attempting to criminalize political activity. You appointed him to prosecute Joe Biden's chief rival for the presidency. And then we have the appointment of David Weiss. Weiss deliberately allowed the statute of limitations to run out on any charges that could have implicated Joe Biden in influence peddling. He originally offered Hunter Biden a sweetheart deal that was ultimately upended by the court. And he's the one you appointed to pursue the charges that could implicate Joe Biden. That leads me to only two explanations, either corruption or incompetence. So which is it?
Those are the kind of questions that judges would rule out of order.
I'm sure you would. Which is it?
Look, I said before, and I will say again, Mr. Weiss was the Republican-appointed United States Attorney appointed by President Trump.
Do you at least see the obvious double standard applied in these two appointments?
Mr. Weiss was a Republican appointee. Mr. Smith is not registered to either party. His entire career was as a career prosecutor.
I'm not asking what their party registrations are. I'm asking about their records and how those records would commend them to the appointments that you made. This is a question of judgment, and it's a question of motive. What was motivating you to do this?
Mr. Smith had a nationwide reputation for integrity and for appropriate prosecution. His work can be measured by what he actually has filed. Everyone in the country can see the indictments.
How can you say that after he was so heavily implicated in the IRS scandal or the rebuke that the Supreme Court gave and many other examples? But let me go on. We've had two IRS whistleblowers inform Congress of attempts by senior Justice Department officials to obstruct a criminal investigation into millions of dollars of ill-gotten and undeclared income to Hunter Biden. They noted several deviations by department officials from normal process that provided preferential treatment, in this case to Hunter Biden, a direct quote, including allowing the statute of limitations to lapse, requesting IRS and FBI management level investigative communications, prohibiting investigators from referring to the big guy or dad in witness interviews, excluding the investigative team from meetings with defense counsel, and notifying defense counsel of pending search warrants. The U.S. Attorney's Office even tipped off the Bidens of an impending search of a storage unit where their records were being kept. Now, that sounds an awful lot like obstruction of justice to me. Was that coming from you or from somebody else?
I'm sorry, was that coming from you? I don't understand the question.
All of the actions that your employees took to obstruct the investigation of Hunter Biden and the earnings that he made and the taxes he failed to declare, their source, and ultimately who they were paid to.
I'm going to say again, with respect to the Hunter Biden investigation, that it has been and still is in the hands of Mr. Weiss, an appointee of President Trump. I don't know about all of these allegations. Some of them appear to have been from the period when the Attorney General appointed by President Trump was still the Attorney General.
Do these charges trouble you at all?
Mr. Weiss will have an opportunity to explain the decisions.
Well, you're the guy in charge. Does this trouble you?
I have intentionally not involved myself in the facts of the case, not because I'm trying to get out of responsibility, but because I'm trying to pursue my responsibility.
Your FBI director testified before this committee of an uptick in, quote, known